For more stories like these, go to www.social-tv.co.za, subscribe to us on YouTube, and follow us on our social mediums.
You're listening to our social newscast with me, Sam Marshall, brought to you by www.social-tv.co.za. And today we have a chat to the CEO of the Tigerberg Hospital Children's Trust. That's Jason Falken. We're talking about how the biggest hospital in the Western Cape and the second largest in South Africa is raising funds. And we're also talking about Tutu Tigers, and they've partnered with Vernon Philander, Ashley Johnson, Juan de Jong, and Cornel Hendrick. Jason, thank you very much for your time. We know Tygerberg Hospital is the largest hospital in the Western Cape and the second largest in the country. But COVID has created an environment, an atmosphere where almost every institution has to think out of the box in terms of how to raise funds. As the CEO of the Children's Trust at the hospital, how have you guys worked your way through this COVID period?
2019 was a year of massive change for us. We implemented quite a lot of organizational changes. So in a sense, by the end of 2020, the end of 2019, beginning of 2020, we were kind of future ready. We had closed our physical office at the hospital, and we moved everything to a cloud-based system to empower our teams to be able to work digitally. This was, of course, before the lockdown and COVID even came. So it was a boon for us to be able to not lose a lot of time in changing over to a completely remote work situation.
But with all of that said, there's still the physical challenges of raising money, especially in a time when almost everybody needs money.
Yes, of course. There's a lot to be said about that, and we can analyze that a little bit. What we have found is that as soon as the lockdown happened and the extent of the pandemic was realized by people, there was a massive retraction in the funding market. So the biggest retraction you can say is from big corporations who are just closed shop and not supporting any initiatives. And then you also found that traditional funders like foundations and things like that also closed shop. And a lot of them delayed their responses to months later. We still haven't come to that month yet. So these are all traditional sources of big funding for us. So yeah, it's very, very strange to suddenly be in a position where we know we need to do a lot more for our kids at the hospital, but we are actually unable to raise funds.
Tygerberg Hospital is, for me, quite an interesting hospital. I grew up in that area. Founded in 1976, it has over 1,400 beds. It serves the communities of Ravensmead, Easter River, Wellington, and the surrounding areas. For somebody who's not familiar with the area and the demographic you're serving, just kind of paint a picture for us quickly.
So, Tygerberg is like an enigma. Not many people, even in Cape Town, know where Tygerberg Hospital is for a start. I find that very, very strange. And then there's all these stories attached to Tygerberg Hospital and the surrounding areas and the areas that fall in the footprint of Tygerberg Hospital that no one really knows about. So that hospital, its footprint spans about 60% of the Western Cape alone. So already it tells you that the vast majority of kids that we support comes to Tygerberg Hospital from those areas. Then also, Tygerberg Hospital draws from other provinces, from the Eastern Cape in particular and the Northern Cape in particular. And Tygerberg Hospital has a history of treating cross-border patients, particularly from Namibia, Botswana, and the like. So, those are really lots and lots of untold stories about Tygerberg and the types of communities that we serve. I mean, just in the immediate vicinity of Tygerberg Hospital, like you mentioned, Ravensmead, etc. A lot of those communities also don't know the level of influence that Tygerberg Hospital has in the South African medical landscape as well as the global medical landscape. So we can look at the association of the academic institutions like Stellenbosch University Medical Campus being physically attached to Tygerberg Hospital, and the wealth of knowledge and research that comes out of that institution alone is something to be proud of, and not many people know about that. As well as, of course, University of the Western Cape, um, and others also attached to that hospital.
Now, you're the CEO of the trust, and you have the unenviable job of having to kind of be that middle road between the hospital, the fundraising aspects, and kind of reaching out and making sure that at the end of the day, as you said, that donors do give money, that you do have access to foreign funding. How have you and your team managed in this very difficult time?
Well, part of our organizational changes last year was to be a strategy-led organization, an innovation-led organization. So, when times are tough and you find yourself in a chaotic situation, what gives you strength and courage is to fall back on a well-articulated and researched plan. And that's what we've been able to do. And that is what has kind of helped us steer through this period and still remain in the game, so to speak. So we've created many unique and interesting platforms that allows us to differentiate from other non-profit organizations who kind of stuck on the paradigm of funder, organization, beneficiary. We look at many, many different aspects, and that comes from an understanding of who our stakeholders are, understanding who we serve, and the depth of influence of the hospital and all the different players in that stakeholder network. Understanding that is key to understanding where we can create additional value where there was none before.
I want to talk about some of those initiatives and projects that you put together. But before we get there, I just want to get an update. How is the hospital managed during this COVID period? What is the daily operations like from a nursing, from a doctor staff perspective, from a beds perspective?
It's gone through phases. I would say in the beginning there was a lot of uncertainty, a lot of chaos, a lot of stress and pressure because of not knowing what's going to happen. And then, of course, all the changes that came flooding into that space. We are physically not able to go to the hospital, of course, because of lockdown restrictions and access and stuff like that. So that's also difficult for us understanding what the needs are. I mean, us not from the charity side, understanding what the needs are. So we rely on our friends in the hospital space. We're talking about something like 2,000 odd nurses at Tygerberg Hospital alone, and doctors and registrars, students, some patients, old patients that have been there. So we rely on them to understand the bigger picture. So so in the beginning, I'd say there was chaos and panic and the burden of the change to what is required. The next phase is kind of like the long run, the long distance marathon to get through this thing. So what I would say is the next thing we'll see is fatigue and mental health issues creeping in. So we have to make sure that we can take care of our medical staff going forward, because I think that'll be a very real problem in the months to come.
Now, before I asked for the update, you talked about some of the initiatives that you guys have developed. And one of the legendary partnerships is your relationship with Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Talk to me about how that relationship started, and then you built a quite an interesting initiative called the Tutu Tigers.
Yes, so our organization was founded way back in 2001, and we were blessed by the Arch himself and Mrs. Leia Tutu being our patrons from the very start, and walking that journey with us since then. Of course, now in the latter part of their life, they are preferring to be outside of the public eye in terms of involvement, and they deserve their break right now, which leaves us as an organization in a funny predicament, because yes, we have the patronage of the Arch and Mrs. Leia, but practically what does that mean and how can we use that? So we grappled with this probably for about a year and a half, and we had an idea that if we started a club of exceptional leaders who could carry on the practical side of the patronage, that would then allow us to retain the patronage and um, carry out the day-to-day work of that by other individuals who can then be charged, um, not very likely, to carry on the good work of the Archer Mrs. Leia. And that is essentially how the Tutu Tigers Club was born.
I love the fact that you, with the Tutu Tigers, brought individuals into the space that is very familiar with Tygerberg and its surroundings. Talk to me about some of their partnerships with like Cornell, Juan, Vernon, and Ashley.
Mm. Look, I'm a firm believer that you can't look to someone else to solve your problems. And you can see that playing out across the South African landscape, and I suppose globally as well. There's a lot of blame and finger pointing and towards injustices in the world. There's always going to be injustice, and you're always going to be in some position where you're on the negative receiving end of that. But at the end of the day, it's only you that can understand your position and your communities and how to get yourself out of the predicament. And if you look at the 422 Tigers, this being Vernon Philander, Cornell Hendricks, Joanne de Jong, and Ashley Johnson, each of them come from the surrounding areas of Tygerberg, impoverished areas with all sorts of social economic problems. Yet some of them have reached, well, not some of them, all of them have reached the global platform in their respective sports, and they continue to contribute on the global scene even after they've left South Africa. In the case of Ashley Johnson and Johan de Jong, so these are living, breathing examples of, if you put your mind to it, you can get somewhere in this world.
So what will Tutu Tigers be doing? How will they aid you in raising that much needed funds? And how do they also position Tygerberg, to your earlier points, just in the minds of the community, especially in the surrounding areas?
Yes, so Vernon is from Ravensmead. So he understands that community very, very well. In fact, both Vernon and Cornell have started their own foundations because they find they need to give back and help their communities, because it's only them that can understand it and how to get out of the predicaments that they are in. I'm talking about the youth now. So they've already, before the Tutu Tigers started, they already had this passion in them. By offering them the Tutu Tigers platform, it's like a magnifier to the work that they already want to do. So we can partner between the trust and their organizations to do work. We can also work with them individually, and also there's lots of different ways that we can derive benefit out of this. So what we've done is we've asked each of the 4 Tigers to have a look at what we call the 4 baskets of care. So it's a kind of language we use to explain the work we do at Tygerberg Hospital. So we've categorized that in terms of 4 baskets, which are neonatology, general pediatrics, specialized care, and social development. So each one of the Tutu Tigers have chosen one of these as their focus area. So, for example, Vernon Philander is passionate about neonatology. Cornell Hendricks is passionate about social development. Joanne de Jong has taken general pediatrics, and Ashley Johnson has taken specialized care. So each one of them can now focus on something very tangible. And we can also help them to communicate that to the outside world in terms of some stories out of Tygerberg. So we can build different campaigns for each one of them to address very specific problems.
What is the financial need of Tygerberg Hospital at the moment? You talked about some of the funding drying up, and that there still constant communication between yourself and your donors and your funders, but because of the pandemic, a lot of that has been kind of benched at the moment. So, what is the current need within Tygerberg, and if someone's listening, how can they get involved?
Yeah, look, the needs are extreme in terms of where we like the institution to be. So if you look at any one of those baskets, I can paint you a little picture. So if you look at neonatology on its own, the dire need there is equipment. So if you imagine each piece of equipment is 500,000 Rand to R1,000,000, and we need 10, 15, 20 of those machines, that accounts for lots of millions of rands. Why that is significant is because Tygerberg Hospital treats the most premature babies in South Africa, and I would venture to say the most premature babies on the continent. So if you imagine not only treating the babies, but the training opportunity for South African and African doctors at Tygerberg, using this machinery that we contribute to the hospital, as well as access to the disease like prematurity. You can see the benefits that can come out of the work that we do. If you look then at social development, which is Cornel Hendricks's basket of care. So if we stick with the example of prematurity, we can look at what are the reasons that cause premature babies. These are societal problems. So these are teenage pregnancies, smoking and drinking and doing drugs while you're pregnant, things like that. So these are societal problems that need to be addressed at the source through social development initiatives. So now we can look at Cornel Hendricks and see, you know what can we do in his community of Wellington? How can we partner with his foundation and support him with youth development initiatives there? Because if a premature baby isn't born in the first place, but is born a normal baby, that's less burden on the hospital. It means a less of an impact on us to raise funds just for neonatal premium machines. So you can see how the holistic nature of healthcare comes to play in Tygerberg and in our communities. So if you want to contribute, I think the easiest way is you can go to our website. You can find the Two to Tigers tab. You click on that. You can read each of the 4 Two to Tigers background story about the baskets of care that they support. And there's a little link at the bottom that takes you to a Give and Gain page, which is a crowdfunding page, and you can choose to support one of them. In fact, the Give and Gain platform even allows you to become a fundraiser on behalf of one of the Tigers. So you can digitally fundraise, make your own campaigns, and support them that way. So it can be quite a fun thing to do as well.
Jason, thank you very much for your time. And I mean, you know this already. I don't have to say it, but keep up the good work.
Thank you, sir. Awesome speaking to you, Sam.
Thank you very much, Jason. Okay, that's Jason Falken, who is the CEO of the Tygerberg Hospital Children's Trust, talking to us about the day-to-day needs of the hospital, but also painting a picture of the kind of innovation they've had to include, develop, and initiate in order to raise funds for some of the issues that's very important to the hospital.